Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Logical, Plausible, Probable. I'm your host, John Maddox, and tonight we're having another stream you just won't want to miss. If you got what it takes, click that link, but prepare yourself, for this arena is not for the weak. Now, let the mental combat begin, but always make sure your arguments are LPP. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to an impromptu Logical, Plausible, Probable stream here. Well, for all of the atheists out there, I have recently discovered this whole Clubhouse extravaganza and been checking out a few of the rooms here and there, and I've engaged in a couple, mostly just been listening, seeing what's, going on here and there. And tonight I joined this one. I've been listening to the guy for a while. He's like very, pompous and, usually pontificating atheist. And heard him go on a bunch of different diatribes. I finally decided to join him because he had been talking ad nauseum about how, theists don't understand science and, make all these claims. And basically we're just clinging to God of the gaps and so on and so forth. So I was trying to have a conversation with him. And of course, he just interrupted nonstop, kept going on, and then was arguing while I was making a statement about what I hear very often from atheists, he then tried to play a nuanced definition game on what I was describing other atheists doing, and then claiming it wasn't he that was doing that. And I'm like, anyway. Then he kept muting me and such. Anyway, I was like, okay, dude, if we're going to go down this rabbit hole, I could call you out for being a lack-theist and not understanding the definition of the word, or we could just have a conversation. Of course, today we went into the whole back and forth about the whole lack-theism thing, and then it ultimately ended with me being a bit of a prick, him being a prick, and then him banning me. And anyway, long story short, it inspired me to once again go on a diatribe about the insanity of so many of the most loudmouth, long-winded atheists that we listen to ad nauseum. And I decided to go on a little rant about this. But real quick, George has requested some Diet Coke to be played briefly. So before I go on my rant, let's do some Diet Coke real quick. The one and only, coming up, ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Godless Engineer with his Diet Coke.
In the information age we currently enjoy, to me it's a completely implausible concept to conclude that HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP, WordPress, apps, or any of the other aspects of technology that utilize software, that they could possibly come into existence without programmers and designers being required.
I agree, that would be crazy to assert, but luckily that's not what we're asserting. That's not what anybody's asserting here. It's only you that's claiming that evolution would entail this. So you're basically building a straw man argument against people that already accept evolution and are misrepresenting their arguments for evolution. You see, the biggest difference here is that we have natural explanations for like why DNA looks the way that it does, why it operates the way that it does, and why the diversity of life that we have here on Earth exists. We have natural explanations for why these things happen. We don't have explanation for why like PHP exists, other than somebody designed it. So what you're really doing here is you're comparing bananas to horses here. But it is not a code, it's a chemical. It's deoxyribonucleic acid. It's an acid. I don't understand why you think it's a code. DNA is no more of a code than Diet Coke and regular Coke.
Man, you can't. It's like every time I listen to that, it's like you can't get over the sheer stupidity of what we hear coming out of these guys' mouths. And last night, I mean, case in point, that atheists that joined and kept going on about just being chemical reactions after we explained things to them in great detail. So incredibly annoying. So incredibly obnoxious. But we will... George, thank you, George. I appreciate the super chat. Oh, man. That's... never goes... Never gets old. Never gets old. Okay, real quick, I'm going to do my rant, and then we might do a little bit of a short open mic discussion, and then I'm going to call it a bed. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, as everybody who's on YouTube, we all hear ad nauseum the lack-theism. I just lack a belief. I don't reject a belief. I don't not have a belief. I don't not believe in God. I just lack a belief in any kind of God. Of course, they then mix and match, the external agent, Christian God versus Zeus and Thor, but then very often they can't even discuss and expound upon the premise of like the differentiation between those types of gods, those characters. But that's neither here nor there. They just go down these rabbit holes, endlessly, and it's just very, very obnoxious. So, oh, by the way, folks, the new feature for slides in StreamYard is going to make my life so much easier, and there's going to be a lot of atheists who are going to be really peeved that StreamYard rolled out this concept, because now it's going to make it extremely easy for me to pull up different presentations and just bash them over the head with them very, very rapidly, and I'm really, really looking forward to doing that in the future. Okay, so Lack-theism is not rational. I did a whole debate on this. This is where this guy comes from. And I argue very strongly that it requires willful stupidity to cling to that definition and just argue that, oh, it's like it's my definition, and you don't want to just accept what I think. It's like, well, cool, man. I can run around and claim that, the sky is green. Just because from my perception and I claim that the sky is green does not make the sky green. I mean, so why would you deciding to change the definition away from what it actually is and the implications of it to something that like doesn't really do much for you anyway? But that's neither here nor there. I've never really understood why you would want to argue from a state of ignorance and act like you're inferior in intellect. It's really, really amazing to me. But anyway, moving on. Okay. So lack-theists claim to lack belief, and the new atheists are attempting, very desperately. They actually made like willful and conscious like emissions to do all this stuff for their own mission. But let's really get this. Let's break this down. So, does God exist? You've got three possible options. You've got yes, no, and maybe. This is pretty darn straightforward, right? I don't know why this is so hard to contemplate. But anyway, God's existence is dichotomous. Either God does or does not exist. And the answer doesn't have to be a binary one, but in the context of defining it in relation to theism, which we'll get into in just a minute, you do have to begin to ultimately come down to different conclusions, or you start looking at this from a slightly different perspective. Okay. You've got the affirmative yes, which would be theism. You got the affirmative no, which is atheism. Or you have the options for being an agnostic. You're undecided, you don't care, you're an atheist. The proposition is nonsense, which is a theological non-cognitivist. Like, these things are clearly outlined. You can go on pretty much any philosophical dictionary resource and whatnot. You can find all these things expounded upon in great detail. But somehow the demographic, which makes all these accusations about people like myself all the time, that I am a Dunning-Kruger, or I'm just ignorant, or I don't, Pine Creek, I don't think. These same clowns make the claims that none of these other things exist. And like these other concepts just are like disappeared in their universe. And they're just going to like redefine this other one that is clearly defined. It's really amazing. Okay, so none of these other options I just outlined there are yes or no affirmatives. Like, I don't really think that requires, too much brain power. I think it's something that Forrest Gump could easily, figure out without too much analysis being necessary, assuming you have basic understanding of the English language. And like the groups that were just outlined, lack-theists are non-theists. So getting into more of a logic standpoint, you got P equals theist, P or not P, theist or non-theist. Like, you're in one of these two groups. So the proposition is not about theist or non-theist. The question is, does God exist? That is what is being addressed as being what is accepted or rejected, affirmed or denied. Like, this is where we are here. So either I believe God exists and you are a theist, or I believe God does not exist and you are an atheist. Like, this is extraordinarily straightforward, folks. Atheism is the rejection of the proposition, does God exist? P equals God does exist, not P equals God does not exist. So for all of the atheists out there who claim that, the points that are being made here aren't actually backed up by the resources, and I always want to show me the literature. Well, here it is. Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. I think Draper wrote this. Atheism is typically defined in terms of theism. Theism, in turn, is best understood as a proposition, something that is either true or false. It is often defined as the belief that God exists, but here belief means something believed. It refers to the propositional content of belief, not to the attitude or psychological state of believing. So, quick caveat here. How much do we hear all the time? It's their mental state. It's their mental state. No, it is not, folks. You don't just get to have this mental state and like deny everything else. This is why it makes sense to say that theism is true or false, to argue for or against theism. And it's okay. The one bad thing about this slides function is the little stupid slide counter, which you guys can't see, is blocking me from being able to read. Okay, there we go. That might work. All right. If, however, atheism is defined in terms of theism, and theism is the proposition that God exists and not the psychological condition of believing that there is a God, then it follows that atheism is not the absence of the psychological condition of believing that God exists. The A in atheism must be understood as negation instead of absence, as not instead of without. So let me repeat that again for any atheists who may be listening. The A in atheism must be understood as negation instead of absence, as not instead of without. I'm pretty sure that is very straightforward. I hope you grasp that. If you don't, I guess join the stream after I get done with my rant and we can discuss it in more detail. Okay, therefore, in philosophy at least, atheism should be construed as the proposition that God does not exist, or more broadly, the proposition that there are no gods. Okay, so this definition has the added virtue of making atheism a direct answer to one of the most important metaphysical questions in the philosophy of religion, namely, is there a God? There are only two possible direct answers to this question: yes, which is theism, and no, which is atheism. Answers like I don't know, no one knows, I don't care, an affirmative answer has never been established, or the question is meaningless are not direct answers to this question. Ladies and gentlemen, we hear different variations of those types of, escape mechanisms all the time. And basically every conversation with a new atheist, Lack-theist, we hear this over and over and over again. Some kind of variation of those types of terms. While if you're paying attention here and understanding what I'm reading from, a high level source here, it's clearly defined why those types of escape mechanisms are not actually valid if you actually have a modicum of understanding of the point that's being made. Yet the atheists continue to cling to these things as their escape mechanism and try to avoid the burden of proof, which, yeah. Okay, so moving on, Encyclopedia Britannica. Reflection on this should lead to a more adequate statement of what atheism is, and indeed as well to what an agnostic or religious response to atheism should be. Instead of saying that an atheist is someone who believes that it's false or probably false that there is a God, a more adequate characterization of atheism consists in the more complex claim that to be an atheist is to be someone who rejects belief in God for the following reasons. Which reason is stressed depends on how God is being conceived. Okay, so let's think about that one more time. A more adequate characterization of atheism consists in the more complex claim that to be an atheist is to be someone who rejects belief in God for the following reasons. So if you have reasons, then obviously you're making a claim as to why you're rejecting. You're providing evidence in favor of your position. Therefore, you are accepting some modicum of the burden of proof, which I think is something that people need to think about in more detail. For an anthropomorphic God, the atheist rejects belief in God because it is false, or probably false, that there is a God. For a non-anthropomorphic God, the God of Luther and Calvin or Aquinas and Maimonides, he rejects belief in God because the concept of such a God is either meaningless, unintelligible, contradictory, incomprehensible, or incoherent. For the God portrayed by some modern or contemporary theologians or philosophers. He rejects belief in God because the concept of God in question is such that it merely masks an aesthetic substance. That is, God is just another name for love, or God is simply a symbolic term for moral ideals. In that context, obviously, it's just more of this like abstract concept rather than the actual entity that a theist is arguing in favor of. Okay, moving on to the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which is a peer-reviewed academic resource. The term atheism describes a person who does not believe that God or a divine being exists. For the most part, atheists have presumed that the most reasonable conclusions are the ones that have the best evidential support. And they have argued that the evidence in favor of God's existence is too weak, or the arguments in favor of concluding there is no God are more compelling. Arguments for the non-existence of God are deductive or inductive. Deductive arguments for the non-existence of God are either single or multi-property disproofs that allege that there are logical or conceptual problems with one or several properties that are essential to any being worthy of the title God. Inductive arguments typically present empirical evidence that is employed to argue that God's existence is improbable or unreasonable. Now, if you are a strict materialist, physicalist, naturalist, like the individual that I interacted with earlier tonight over on Clubhouse, you hold that there is no reason to believe in God because all there is the physical world, everything we can see. We can't prove that there is a God from the naturalistic perspective. Therefore, God must not exist. And I mean, I think you're taking a rather firm position in that context. Now, there is a very interesting paper that was written and published in the Royal Society Journal of Philosophy about this exact topic. It's very fascinating. I read the whole thing, and it really gets into great amount of detail about the demographic that I'm describing here, the Lack-theists, and explains in a very, very, detailed manner why they're just so wrong and incorrect in this dogmatic position they take about Lack-theism. But I'll just read a brief portion of it. In this paper, I demonstrate how certain contemporary atheists have problematically conflated atheism with agnosticism, knowingly or unknowingly. The first type of conflation is semantic fusion, where the lack of belief in God is combined with the outright denial of God under the single label of atheism. The second is morphological fission, which involves the separation of atheism into two subcategories where lack of belief in God is labeled as negative atheism and outright denial of God as positive atheism. Unfortunately, some atheists have implicitly or explicitly, intendedly or unintendedly, sought to distort the boundaries between atheism and agnosticism. In order to avoid defining atheism as the denial of God's existence, some atheists end up misrepresenting their stance by conflating atheism with agnosticism. This occurs through one of two ways. Either atheism is redefined to mean lack of belief and denial of God's existence, in which case both atheism and agnosticism, as defined above, are semantically fused under one term, or lack of belief in God and denial of God's existence are demarcated as two different subcategories of atheism. I call the former approach semantic fusion and the latter morphological fission. However, whether God exists and whether or not we can know if God exists are two different questions. Whether God exists is a matter of ontology. Knowledge of God's existence is a matter of epistemology. It is important to note that an ontological claim cannot be considered to be a sound assertion in the absence of a clear epistemological pathway. Otherwise, this would be considered an unjustifiable position. Understanding the distinctive territories of ontology and epistemology can help better frame the positions of theism and agnosticism. Now, before I go on any further on that, I mean, think about what you just read there, folks. Like, you have to really contemplate these things in a little bit greater detail and depth than what we hear from, the standard atheist here on YouTube that don't actually, as I love to say, they can't actually back up their BS in the diatribes they go on. Okay, atheism and theism are ontological positions since they are making claims about existence, whereas agnosticism is simply an epistemological position because it is a position about what can be known. It follows, therefore, from the law of the excluded middle that one can only be a theist or an atheist ontologically. If one believes that the proposition God exists is true, then one must simultaneously believe that the proposition God does not exist is false. Likewise, if one believes that the proposition God does not exist is true, then one must simultaneously believe that the proposition God exists is false. To believe both to be true or false at the same time is contradictory. Let me read that little piece one more time. Likewise, if one believes that the proposition God does not exist is true, then one must simultaneously believe that the proposition God exists is false. To believe both to be true or false at the same time is contradictory. So basically, you have to suspend the laws of logic to be a Lack-theist. So oh man, the fact that I keep having to explain this is like the fourth or fifth time I've done this presentation, and it irritates me so much that I keep having to do this. But as I say, this, I'm going to wrap it up here. The rejection of this shows new atheists are either evolving into very, very, very stupid people, or they're just willful idiots, which I always misspell on purpose because it cracks me up to make fun of the internet atheists who don't actually seem to think much about the position they take, and it's so frustrating. Anyway, enough of my diatribe. If anybody wants to hop in, I think Andrew's in the backstage. If anyone wants to hop in, I've got the link pinned in the side chat. We'll do a short discussion if you guys want to, and then we'll wrap it up. So, link coming. Let's see. Everyone wants to join. The link is over in side chat. What's up, Andrew? How you doing, Matt?
Hi. Two things to say briefly. You know what they say if you listen to fools, right?
Sorry, say it again.
If you listen to fools,
I'm assuming you become a fool or come into folly or something like that.
Nope, nope. If you listen to fools, the mob rules.
Well, I would say that's a very accurate statement.
And that's coming from an atheist, Ronnie James Dio.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yep, it's a Black Sabbath song.
Oh, really? Well, every once in a while, a atheist songwriter can come up with a moment of truth, right?
Yeah, but I think he's saying that more for Christians. Well,
I would agree with that, but
But yeah, the second thing I would like to say, they're getting a little bit confused with their definitions because if you break an atheist down, you're a theist.
Man, I tell you what. So, by the way, sidebar, everybody. I'm blaming Redefined Living, also known as Sam. I'm blaming Sam for doing this rant today because Sam got me hooked. Like he introduced me to this Clubhouse thing the other day. And now I've engaged, and without fail, within a day and a half, I've been kicked out by an atheist, and now I'm irritated with one of them, and now I'm having to do a late night rant. So my lack of sleep is blamed on Sam. How are you doing?
You're welcome. My pleasure. Yeah, I just got kicked out of a room just a few minutes ago.
Oh, you did too?
Yeah. It was the same one.
Oh, really?
I went in there, talked to the guy. And I said, well, since I'm here, let me ask you a couple questions. And he wasn't having it. They don't want people to challenge him. They just want people to go in there and I guess, look dumb or something.
Well, not came into Smokey's room last time. That was hilarious.
Yeah, I saw that there was an interesting group going on over there. Yeah, Knock he's a character. I kind of ignore him now because I think he's just like he's a useful pawn in the macro game, I think.
Well, I asked him a question. I said, if you're in a dark room, can you read a book?
Well,
and,
if I have a flashlight.
Yeah, he said if I had a flashlight, but I ended up saying, no, you've got no other source of light. You've got a book, you're in the room, it's dark, you can't read it. Can you read the book? And he never answered it.
Well, those kinds of concepts for them, they go into like hyper literal mode and have a hard time actually grasping the point, like the bigger picture points that are being made. It's a truly fascinating issue that seems to plague at least internet atheists. I'm just like, dude, this is some very basic common sense kind of stuff here. Like, it's dark, you don't have light. Can you read the freaking black letters on the white page that you can't see? I mean, obviously not.
He wouldn't say no. But to contrast that, my brother, my brothers, I've been here before. They are both atheists now. They have been for a little while. But in order to try and get me to understand atheism, they were trying to say, oh, the car's coming down the road. My fiance at the time, with my ex-wife now, was mentioned, and it's him and my niece. She and my niece. And my brother was trying to tell me I couldn't save either. I couldn't save both. I had to save one or the other. Which one would I save? And that's where I get the concept of, well, if you're in a dark room and you can't read, and you've got something that you can't read, and you've got no other light source, it's the same deal.
Well, Greenie did come up with a workaround, though. If you learn Braille, then you would be able to read the book in the dark.
Yeah, but you don't have Braille and you don't have the book. That's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Okay, so let's come up with so quick caveat. So if it was a book that was written in Braille and you were able to you understood Braille, then you could read the book in the dark.
And since Nock doesn't understand either, I think he'd have a hard time reading the book anyway. He's going to look at it, and even if he has a light and he doesn't understand it, he can't even read it.
Well, it's ironic. I should have thought about this in terms of Braille because I actually used Braille as an example one time trying to explain the premise of like communication to an atheist. And it's like, people can communicate a digital language via bumps on metal, glass, plastic, wood. Like you can, it's just bumps. Like that's it. That's all it is, and you're able to read. And like it really amazes me how like the whole. I think I was arguing about the premise of like what is digital, and they were arguing that like it's only binary. And that one gets me every time. The atheist, I have argued with so many atheists who adamantly claim that the only form of digital is binary, and it's like you don't. Oh my goodness, there's so many things wrong with that position, but it's like incapable of grasping the differentiation points there.
It's like when they
It's
say
like
that DNA is
communicating
a
with
code.
a deaf person, right? You can sign or they can lip read. But they have to be taught to lip read, and they have to be taught to sign, and you have to be taught to sign too.
Yep, no, that's very true. What were you saying, Sam?
I was going to say, like when they say that DNA is, is or is not a code, when they start going down that whole thing. Well, no, it's just a medium. It's a sequence, like the piece of paper, the sequence of the arrangement, the specific arrangements of the dots on the paper. That's the code.
Yeah.
Well,
But,
what really gets me too is the inability for them to differentiate that something like made out of a substance doesn't define the medium. The substance of the medium that is being used is not the information itself. And it's like I think one of the examples I used was I had a picture of a wooden box that had like little cubbies in it, and it had inside of those cubbies were wooden letters, and it's like both the letters, the A, B, A to Z, made out of wood, are in a box that is also made out of wood. Does the fact that is wood what communicates the English language is being represented by shapes that are made of wood? And like you can apply the exact same logic. You do the same thing with metal or plastic or whatever. Like this is not that difficult, but it just goes over their heads in relation to our existence.
Yeah, it's like there's they posit that there's some invisible veil that when we're talking about biology, all of a sudden all of these things don't apply.
No, that's very true. Yeah, it's everything. All of the recognized principles just get tossed out the window in relation to questioning our existence.
Yeah, they say, well, it's biology. We're talking about biology, so that's the point. Still need that designer.
So, Slavic, did you number one, did you wake up on time for church? And number two, was your wife angry with you at when you came to bed late?
So I got to get up for church no matter what, because she'll come kick me out of bed. So I did wake up, but yeah, I went to sleep early. I did not get enough sleep. My muscles are tight on my neck because I didn't get enough sleep. But I was gonna say, just on this topic, I don't know if specifically, I was wondering if the reason most people do not follow logic properly is because they don't teach it in school. Like they teach you what to think, not how to think. And then like when you talk to somebody and you're like, how do you not understand this basic concept? I was just like,
yeah, I would say that's definitely a problem. And I would say that the lack of teaching it definitely contributes to the problems. However, at the same time, I think there is a willful suspension of the innate ability. Because, I mean, just because you're not taught something doesn't mean your brain cannot do basic comprehension, like basic critical thinking skills, critical thinking and, analysis. Like we do that instinctively, right? Now you can get better at it and learn more efficient ways to do it and, be much more conscientious of the analysis that you're doing, right? But at the same time, just because you haven't learned the laws of logic doesn't mean that you can't comprehend why something makes sense, right? If we couldn't do that, then nobody would ever figure out what the laws of logic are, right? So I agree with what you're saying completely as one of the ways that the brainwashing of the what to think, not how to think point that you're making has become so prevalent. I agree with you on that. I think in many cases with a lot of the atheists, there's also a willful rejection of those skills. What do you guys think about that?
yeah, I actually have three three cousins that I know pretty well, and all of them are college educated, and all three of them lean completely liberal. And when you talk to them, it's very hard to follow their thinking because they jump from one idea to another and think it's the same idea. So that's kind of the thing. I'm surprised that their critical thinking is so scattered that it makes me think that maybe they do this on purpose in school or something. I'm not even sure. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I don't think I would disagree with what you just said. It seems like a lot of the life skills that should be taught in school so that people can be, more successful they would. For example, if you're a child coming from maybe like a poverty-stricken area, and maybe you don't have a functioning family unit that can teach you how to, invest in certain things for your retirement or even in your education, and learn how to balance a checkbook, and learn that, credit cards should be treated like a debit card. If you don't have the money, then, you shouldn't be spending it, and basic logic and under comprehension type skills. I can't help but wonder, why would they not teach people this unless there was some bigger, I don't want to start talking about a conspiracy, but maybe an agenda or something like that. It seems like it would make sense.
Like making wage slaves. I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole, but I was even thinking, like, I wonder if there's even, because I know I think I talked to an older person that he said they used to actually teach logic in grade school. Like, it was like a course that taught you how to think logically. And when I went to school, there was nothing that taught you specifically how to use logic to figure out problem stuff. Yeah, they have like general like comprehension stuff, but not like trying to hit the main points to make sure that you use your brain to the fullest capacity.
No, yeah, I mean, I would agree with you on that completely. And yes, you're right. It's been completely removed. And beyond that, they're even taking it to the extreme of not teaching, at least not at the same level that at least I know I was, and people before me definitely were, the details of like, basic mathematical logic even. And it's more of a, here's how you do this on a calculator, rather than actually truly understanding the principles behind the calculations that are being conducted. And that I find to be a very disturbing problem. And we're seeing it in our education, our higher education systems, where it's almost 90% of college freshmen are having to take remedial math. Well, why is that? Right. Well, I mean, in higher level mathematics, you can't exactly get away with just like pushing buttons on a calculator. Like, you have to understand what's being conducted, right? And they're not teaching them the fundamental basics of it in high school. They get to college where you have to have it. Now, what do they have to do? They have to go back and learn what they should have learned in high school. And I mean, that's a serious problem.
And another thing is that even like just showing all the sides of an argument, like, most people would be against it. Like, how they say they don't teach creation in school. If they're not afraid of it, why are you so worried about it? Like, if the science is on your side, what's the problem with mentioning it as a theory, at least, right? To get at least people thinking there's not one, like, science isn't settled. Just make sure that they can think for themselves and come to decisions for themselves. And even if you help them out and say, like, this is how this scientist got to this conclusion, what's the danger of showing them other theories? Because most people will be like, no, separate that, keep it out of school. Like, I got two little girls. I sent them both to private school because I don't want to send them to public school, and then by the time they're like in 6th grade, they know nothing almost.
Yeah. Like with my daughter, she was with her mom, and the school district she's in is like literally the best one in the state. But even with that, there's quite a bit of effort to like have her learn other stuff out external to school, because like there's not teaching them the things that I kind of took for granted. It's kind of disturbing.
Yeah, it's Karl. I believe it was Karl Popper is the one who who coined the phrase pseudoscience, because he was examining the way that Sigmund Freud was doing his science, and everything that he would discover, he would adopt that into his model. And then meanwhile, he was observing Albert Einstein trying to actually falsify his theory. And he said, one of these guys is actually doing it right. And the other, which would be Freud, is doing the pseudoscience. And then you fast forward to today, like what you're talking about. They're not teaching opposing views. They're teaching one falsify, such as like genetic diversity, or finding that all humans are actually similar, almost exactly the same. That should have been a falsification of the biology, that humans are evolved and in different states of evolution. Then we find out that's not the case. That's a direct falsification. But that's not what they're doing. So evolution literally falls under the category of pseudoscience, but they don't care.
Well, is that because supposedly to them creation falls under pseudoscience as well?
No, because we can't change our model. It can only be falsified, right? Like if we discovered that like the mitochondrial or the Y chromosome, if that wasn't the case, that would be a hard pill to swallow. Or all humans flow out of the 3 haplogroups. If that wasn't the case, that would be difficult. That would be difficult to recover from.
Well, I mean, we've got the COVID thing. They say don't take the injection because it changes your DNA. However, the DNA is so protected that in order to change it, they have to jab you with this stuff that's going. Well, and that's not going to say it's going to break into the cell, but it's going to make the RNA and change the mRNA. I'm coming from a person who doesn't.
Be careful with the terminology that you use, because YouTube will, potentially strike the channel if you say something that they'll recognize with their algorithms.
Okay, but I mean, the difference between DNA and its mRNA, which is the messenger version of the RNA, correct?
Yeah, I believe it's the DNA transcribes the RNA, and the RNA vaccine, they'll say, I believe it's called reverse transcriptase, where all of a sudden you can have a random reverse, and there can be a type of alteration.
Yeah, and of course, the latest thing that they've come up with, supposedly, is a needle-free way of getting the vaccine. However, the way they describe it, it's a bunch of little needles.
Try not to use that word. It's an algorithm word, but
let's not even discuss that. It's not worth.
Okay, I mean, some people have fears of them, right?
But how would that relate to the topic of trying to categorize the Bible or the biblical model?
I'm trying to understand science from a science perspective. That's all, and this is stuff that makes the way, and that's the closest example I can think of. So don't worry.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a whole plethora of fields of science that are not related to the origins issue.
Of course.
Yeah. So but when there are opposing views, what's the harm of teaching that? But when it comes to religion, even they'll talk about Christianity in school, and they'll talk about like the Muslims and the Jewish religion. There's a bit of diversity
here in Australia.
Yeah, but when it comes to the sciences, what do they say? Nope. There's only one model, and it just has to be the case. There's only one way to interpret the evidence. That's not true.
The 3 branches they teach here in Australia, and I'm assuming it's the same in America. It's only when you get into university that you start dividing them up. But it's physics, it's chemistry, and biology. Those are the 3 levels of that, and all of the science stems from that.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, there's a powerful movement that's taking place right now with that intelligent design movement.
Yeah,
You know, that
well,
has pretty powerful implications, and I don't think it's the science that anyone's necessarily running for. I think it's just the implications of the conclusion. If all of a
yeah,
sudden it's unavoidable that there was an intelligent designer, well, you really only have one option. I mean, the atheists will say, well, that doesn't mean it's your God. Well, okay,
yeah, that's true. That's
sure.
true, and
Which one is it
I
then?
do understand. I do understand that. Of course, I do subscribe to intelligence design because I don't think anybody who would try and put together something that's going to implode or explode. It would have to be something that would be some kind of order. It wouldn't be chaos. It wouldn't have to be chaos and then order, and order turns to chaos. But of course, the way the biblical argument puts it, it's order that becomes chaos.
The interesting thing for me is that they almost like do a double standard, or just completely ignore what they're saying, because they're like, well, a theory has to be falsifiable. But then anytime there's any kind of data that falsifies their theory, they kind of sweep it under the rug instead of being like, well, we celebrate science, right? It has to be falsifiable. Therefore, see how we're improving, instead of kind of like,
Yeah.
because they would say that about creation. He's like, well, your theory can't be falsifiable. Therefore, it's not really a theory. Yet every time their theory has some data that is making it falsifiable, they, instead of being like, see, we're improving science, they kind of try to sweep it under the rug so nobody notices how many times data
Either
was
that or
falsified.
they shift the goalpost.
Yeah, same difference, but yeah.
Same difference, but that's what I'm trying to think of here, and that's basically what they do. And sorry, I lost my train of thought, so I'll just simply shut up. I had something else to say, but it's gone.
You were talking about shooting the goalpost.
Yeah, no, it's got nothing to do with shift the goalpost, but that's the best way of putting it. But it was before that, and I didn't even get to think about it. Sorry, I live with Asperger syndrome, so like your liberal cousins, I go all over the place. That's the best way of putting it.
Fair enough. Yeah, well, I mean, evolution would be a falsification of the biblical model. And that's why the debate gets so passionate and heated, because you have these two worldviews and these two different interpretations of the same evidence, and they're colliding with each other.
Yeah, that's true.
That is the debate, and that's why they should teach both sides of the debate.
Well, they used to teach both. Like when I was going through high school, like going into the equivalent of, well, I don't know what they call it in America, but in Australia we split it between primary, secondary, and then it's university after that. So between secondary and between primary school to secondary, there's no middle school. But the way my grade 8 science teacher said it to our class, I think, and I can't remember if this is exactly what it said verbatim, but they said, I will teach you evolution so that you can see how stupid it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's my first memory of science, but I never did science after that in school. So I'm at the mercy of the scientists for that.
Yeah.
Hey, so real quick, so Hurricane, yes, I did. I saw your email, and I have. I watched that video that you sent me, and I think it's very interesting that the new videos that Dr. Stadler and a couple other guys have been putting together recently, they've been releasing on Discovery Institute's channel, are like almost the direct antithesis of that guy's very quick little oh yeah, we totally can account for abiogenesis, and like here's the chemistry for it that isn't actually the real explanation of all this stuff, and doesn't account for the things that are being addressed by things like the videos that they're releasing over there on Discovery Institute are pretty, from a chemistry perspective, are pretty interesting. I don't know if you've seen the most recent one, but it's quite interesting, the different things they are covering. Oh man, Cafe is in the house. Shelly's here. What's up? How you doing? I mean, it looks like we may have a atheist in the side chat. Vinny. The link is pinned, and I just posted it a second ago. So feel free to come on in and explain to us why you're not desperately avoiding the obvious, and why your worldview is more coherent than the theist worldview. So you can come on in and back up your position, or I guess maybe you can just continue to be like most and make claims and not actually come and back them up. So
all I'm saying is that's the way my teacher described it. Okay, I'm not trying to cover my ass with that. Okay, I do think evolution is stupid because I just can't see how it makes sense.
Yeah, I tell you what, man, the more that we learn about biological systems, I really don't know how people are actually buying into this with the level of hyperconfidence.
And isn't abiogenesis the Achilles heel, so to speak, of evolution?
Well, I mean, yes, it is the gigantic gaping Achilles heel. Like if you were, if the Achilles heel was the entire leg, then yes.
But somebody does does their Achilles heel in a race, and the race is over for them athletically.
Well, think about it this way. If their model is true and this process has been going on for millions and millions of years, then really they're only trying to explain this last little tail end, because they've got nothing before that last common ancestor in their model, which is fairly recent when compared to their entire timeline.
Mm-hmm. And the funny thing about it is how they explain. They're like, we have science to explain everything. We don't know how it happened, but soon science will even explain that, which is the same argument. They say you can't use God of the gaps, but they use the same science of the gaps argument without realizing it's the exact same logical structure.
Right.
Okay. I mean, the way I view it is I tend to take Faz Runner's view for the origin of life scientists. Basically, the Earth could not support any form of life, except that when they're doing that, they clean the labs, they even clean the clay, chemically clean it so that they can, produce life in the lab. But it's life that wouldn't survive outside of the lab under the turbulent conditions that the Earth would have been in.
Yeah, I've never been able to accept the premise that chemical reactions that we're not being able to pull off in stable environments are somehow more likely to have occurred in horrifically unstable environments. Like that doesn't make that makes no coherent sense, in my opinion.
But I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like they're creating the life survives in the lab. You take it out of the lab, it dies.
No. That's my point. I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying like it's not remotely a coherent position to take, in my opinion, in any other context. Be like, so I can't do this. I can't even pull off what I would need to have happen in a controlled environment where I have the ability to control the vast majority of the variables. And I still can't do it. But somehow in a scenario where it's much less stable and I don't control the variables, it's somehow more likely to have occurred. Like that it does not seem one of a close relative of mine is a PhD biochemist, works very high level, right? And the experiments that they work on, the things that they've done, it's like so freaking hard for the simplistic things they have to pull off, right? They do in their doing their work, right? And it's like, you're telling me that something that's way more complicated than what you're doing happened when you can't even pull off simple stuff, or it takes you like a bunch of tries to be able to pull things off? Like, come on, man. Like, just let's get real. There's no way that's plausible. But I guess if you have enough faith, you can pull it off. Real quick, so let's see. Cheryl's in the house. Kelvin just joined us. I think I saw one and only Jamie is bounced around in side chat, and Duke Nukem's talking some trash. Let's see, what's Jamie Russell saying? Homo Nutella Eddie exists today. And Shelly, I think Shelly may be needing our prayers. I'm not sure what's going on with her, but I think she may also need to be needing some support and prayers for her health, I think. Sure, if you need prayers, let me know, and we'll make sure to let people know.
So
oh, go ahead, Sulk.
I got a quick question, because I haven't looked into the how detailed the models are for the abiogenesis. But I was thinking, is there actually any plausible way that at least theory on how abiogenesis could have happened, or possibly could have happened? Not like just saying like, well, these chemicals, see how they fit, but like how these chemicals come together. I understand the creation of the chemicals. There's a problem with that. I would say, like, let's set that aside, because they will magically wave their hands. But I'm saying, for what reason these chemicals, after they're created, why would they come together in that form? Because the whole purpose is that it has to become life to continue replication. Or is there any good theories on that? Anybody know?
To my knowledge, no. And more importantly, to my knowledge, they're not even at that stage of consideration. Like, it's not like they can't even account for all the parts yet. So all of the it might, well, if this and 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 this all maybe happened, then okay, maybe we got life. But there's no like formal model that I'm aware of that accounts for it, because they haven't even accounted for all the parts yet.
So it's kind of silly then. How can they be so confident that it happened then? Like, it's almost like saying, there's this magic black box, don't worry about it. We still believe it happened. If they have not even a clue to like a plausible way this could have happened. Well, it's just kind of crazy how people are so confident in this.
Yeah, it's even worse though, because this process, all of these molecules or elements have to come together at the exact same place and at the same time. I mean, what good is it if they're 5 feet apart? And what good is it if, one part of the process happens and then a little bit of time goes by and that part of the process will degrade?
Yeah, I did watch James Tour explain how difficult it would be to make the actual little pieces to put it together. But I was like, let's just give them that they have those. Like James Tour says, I'll give them all the parts, make it. And if they don't even have a model how they can possibly come together.
Well, even then, even if you were to grant that assembly, that magical assembly from their position where there's no intelligent chemist, right? That doesn't mean that you're going to get that life element, whatever that is. Because when you have a cell, you have all of those components that are already in place. But that doesn't necessarily mean that cell is going to be alive. Like that 1 nanosecond after that cell dies, you still have everything in place. All of those molecules are still there in order, but that life element has left it. What is that? What is that life element?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I don't know. It's just insane how people are so confident in evolution when fundamental things are not even being discussed. It's just kind of like hand waving, distraction, and people are like, "Yeah, I guess it works. Look at all this noise."
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe John, did you share that article with me? I've got an article, and it was talking about in regards to cancer research, and there's this team that tried to go back and start duplicating some of these processes in regards to cancer research, and I think it was 70% of these things could not be duplicated. In other words, they were just getting their funding and just publishing bull crap to get more funding. And so it makes you wonder when something, if that can happen with cancer research, when you have this, this abiogenesis scenario, when these people's whole lives and worldviews are at stake, can you not see that happening there too? I'm not saying that it is or is not. Just saying you have this recipe for fraud and
It's human
shenanigans.
nature.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the inability to recreate or to duplicate the so many of the the hypothetical findings, it's plaguing academia in a variety of disciplines. I mean, chemistry, biology. I mean, just all these different sciences are, like hard sciences even, are, oh yeah, we have a method, and then half the time, like a lot of times, they're not even presenting their methods in the papers. And then some of the dude, like they're not the ones that have, they've got gotten the methods from some other source or whatever, and then try to reproduce it, or taking them from the papers and not be able to duplicate it. It's a serious problem, and it's been a recognized problem for quite a while now. And they're just like every couple of years, there's another, somebody else does a paper on it. Like, oh, well, it used to be 50%, couldn't be. Now it's 70%. Like that's a problem, folks. And this is why I get so much entertainment out of and I, bash on, evo atheists sometimes for the, worshiping of consensus. And it's like, so let me get this straight. You are bending over and bowing before the consensus of a bunch of people who, per their own admission in many cases, aren't actually presenting things that can actually be backed up through the scientific method that you found your entire worldview on. I mean, think about that for a second. Oh, the scientific method. It's like, yeah, so these guys that you're claiming we should listen to aren't even using the scientific method, it seems, because it can't be replicated. So testable, repeatable is maybe a talking point, but it doesn't seem to be backed up by modern science these days.
Yeah, actually, I think I saw James Tour. He did he put up like a really popular science journal, and he would be like, look at this, and let's follow their research. And it goes back to another article, then it bounces to another article, finally gets to the original people that did the experiment. And they repeated the same exact experiment that has been done hundreds of times. Something to do with like the, before life experiment with the same exact stuff that's been happening for like 30 years. And they did the experiment, and then they made another hypothesis, like, we'll see how this could have happened. And then people said, oh, see, this experiment proves, which it doesn't do anything new. Yet 3 or 4 articles references later, it becomes this like phenomenon almost of nothing.
Yeah, and I think Vinny missed the entire point that I was making. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Is a scientific
Big time.
method worse than a religious method? Scary.
Well, based on those numbers that I was talking about in regards to cancer research, I mean, if the success rate is 70% failure, that means, 70% failure, 30% success. I mean, that's the lowest F. So if we're grading it based on percentage, that just fails miserably, and that's their high standard.
Yeah, this atheist is just you popped up this comment. This is a perfect example of can't follow a logical idea. Like nobody was talking about a religious method. They were talking about how science can make sure that it's proving what it says. It's better than like how does that have anything to do with anything?
Which leads to the question that James Tour once asked in a debate of the person he was debating, who was an atheist. What's it like at the top of Mount Stupid?
That's true.
Now, I've probably taken that way out of context, but I mean, that's the question.
Yeah, Rob Ward makes a good point. He says science has become an idol for worshipers. I would agree with you on it. What's very interesting is like they're almost personifying science now, and like trying to. No, I guess personify is a good word for it. Like science is they're the new. It's the atheist god, which is ironic. Yeah. It's kind of like the other day Fauci was talking about like, I am science. It's like, okay, so are you like the high priest now? Like, what's going on of the whole deal? Are we have like idols to you or something, and worship all this stuff? But I mean, using him as an example, but it seems like the same thing applies to some of the different icons, if you will. Oh, Lawrence Krauss and Dawkins, all that kind of stuff, and it's like, I don't think they're. If you actually go behind the curtain, they're not nearly as valid and substantive as the people like to think.
And I think another thing is that science is hiding behind engineering, and almost like using the clout of engineering. Because layman people, they don't usually look into science. People I know, they're not that interested in like figuring out biogenesis or anything. You got to be a certain type of person to be interested in that kind of stuff. And most people just look at, oh look, we got all these technologies. See, that's a progress of science without realizing most of it is engineering. And then science kind of says, see, everything goes forward. We're progressing without actually showing anything that they progressed.
That's a great point. And what I find so ironic is that our growing knowledge of biology is really doing nothing but indicating how inferior our technology is. And that's the irony for me of like when we have the whole biomimicry engineering. It's like, oh, let's find really cool stuff in biological systems and see if we can like recreate on the macro level and like implement it as a new technology. And then when we do something like that, it's like, oh, look what humans did. And it's like, yeah. So basically we reverse engineered this and are figuring out ways to make it applicable for our usage. So it's not exactly the same as like completely novel development of a new concept.
It's the same thing as getting an old patent and saying, oh look, it's brand new technology, when it's just old patent that you just copy off somebody.
Right.
Like the Russians and the Chinese. The Chinese still can't copy the Russian engines properly.
You can find on YouTube, you can go and you can search, there's this video of this team, and what they're doing is they're taking the instructions to create a plastic or synthetic bunny, rabbit, or sunglasses, and what they're doing is they're taking the instructions and they're printing them out in the form of a genetic code and a little tiny dot, and they're taking these dots and they're assembling these dots to fabricate either the sunglasses or the bunny rabbit or whatever it might be. So you have this bunny rabbit that's plastic, but if you get out a microscope and you look at it, you can see that the instructions to create this thing are printed out just like in a genetic type code. See, but when we see that, we say, that's obviously been designed by something intelligent. But then when we're talking about biology, it crosses that magic veil where now all of a sudden these what is a design questions have to be asked, and all of a sudden we just lose all concept of logic and reality, and we have to pretend we don't know what a design is.
Well, what I find so obnoxious about that is the point you're making about little synthetic rabbit or whatever. It's like in the right now, in the here and now, we could store a 3D print script for the plastic bunny in a gene sequence or in a DNA sequence, and you could literally connect the DNA sequence to the 3D printer. Now you'd have just some like translation mechanisms there, but like you could download the 3D print script from the DNA and then execute it on a 3D printer to print out a three-dimensional object. Like this is totally doable, and yet that concept, it can from the atheist perspective, can in no way, shape, form, or fashion be applicable to whether or not there would be an intelligent agent necessary to pull off that versus life. And I'm like, okay, so my genome has the ability for my entire 6'1" body to exist. Like That's a little bit more significant than 3D printing a little bunny rabbit. which one has more complicated stuff going on here and more detail and more intricacies and more interdependencies? The little plastic robot or rabbit, or my body? And if we at some point were able to 3D print a robot, like a human-sized robot that does all sorts of cool stuff, and do some of the things like the Boston Dynamics robots are doing, like dancing to music and stuff. Okay, so let's say we figured out how to have ribosomes form this robot. Would anybody ever argue that could have ever happened without intelligent agency being necessary, even though you ended up using biological components to do it? I don't think so. I mean, correct me if I think I'm wrong there, but it's just this is not a gigantic leap to make the connection, in my opinion.
I used to do these puzzles when I was a kid. They would join the dots.
So I say it again?
I used to do these puzzles when I was a kid. They were called join the dots.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Do those basic connected dots. Well, hey, as Slavic was saying, they've removed logic from school. Math is now racist, and before we know it, connect the dots drawings will have some kind of they won't be politically correct, and and then we'll wonder why we're totally screwed as a civilization comes to an end when people grow up and the days when I used to do connect the dots, it's just not the same anymore.
That guy, the one where you put the facial hair and the with the magnetic.
Oh yeah.
That guy, that's no good. You can't watch. They don't, put Mrs. Doubtfire on the channel 11 anymore.
Listen, when Mr. Potato Head is now considered misogynist, is no more. Mr. Potato Head is no more. Seriously. I mean, that at this point, it's almost comical. I'm just when Mr. Potato Head becomes socially, an anathema, is an outcast. I mean, seriously, you can't make this stuff up anymore, folks. We live in a world where Mr. Potato Head is now the bad guy and has been discontinued. I mean, come on. I
mean, couldn't they just plug in some gender neutral features or something on? I'm just kidding. They probably will.
It's just what is going on? I mean, think about this. Toy Story is going to be banned from libraries and I mean, don't you remember Toy Story, Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head? I mean, come on now,
Dr. Seuss.
I got one for you that's not allowed, but it's hilarious, right? It's hilarious, dude. I think.
Oh gosh.
Sometime at night, Paul Malone look up in sky and say, "What the hell going on up there? Do UFO live on other planet, phoning home like ET?" Carl Malone read on TV about white people getting deducted by alien, sticking all kind of hell up their butt, and that's a damn thing. Now, Carl Malone never seen no flying saucer himself, but if he do, that's gonna be a spooky time. That's why Carl Malone say government got to step up and give 102% to keeping them little green man off this here earth. Because the day them dudes stick something up Carl Malone butt, that ain't gonna be no good time for nobody, especially Carl Malone butt. Listen up, E.T. You better stay the hell back. Nanu, nanu. Until next time, this here Carl Malone.
I don't know if you've seen Carl Malone, but he's got a really thick Louisiana accent, so it's talk.
Oh yeah. Oh, Carl Malone's he's a straight up country boy. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yeah, that's a pretty good impression. And he got in trouble for that. And that was back when they did the Man Show, and Carl Malone has talked to him about it. It's kind of he's fine with it, I guess. So I think it was good. Can't do that anymore.
Yeah, well, isn't he in what's the term? Blackface?
I guess so. Yeah, that's what they came back to haunt him, I guess. And it's dude, Carl Malone's a national hero. It's give it a rest,
Sorry, I'm just saying the interesting part about it is most atheists will say that in a Christian society, people have no rights. But the more atheistic or the more secular we become, the more the rights are being taken away of free speech, freedom to choose your own life, pretty much. With most Christians said, no, you do whatever you want. We're just saying that we think it's wrong, right? So it's like complete reversal, but people don't see it. Just weird.
Well, it's just like where they say that, atheist societies are freer than religious societies. We're talking about like Europe and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, yeah. So number one, even before the madness is going on around the world right now, that wasn't true, in terms of freedom. And right now, that sure as hell isn't true. Like, that is, and same thing applies to the more atheistic states here in America. Like, let's see, is New York freer or more restricted than Tennessee? I'm gonna just go out on a limb and be willing to bet whatever's in my bank account that is Tennessee's freer. I'm 100%. 100% guaranteed, and Sam, you're out in a like your county, I guess, is still fighting back a little bit to some of the restrictions, but everything surrounding you is getting into full scale, like freaking Gestapo, show me your papers mode, right?
Yeah, California. We're right behind New York and all of those things. I think this year, last year, we took first place in being the worst state for small businesses and retirement.
Yeah, but most managers
What state is that, or are you keeping that private?
California.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, man.
But the thing is like this is their mecca, right? They've had complete control for so long. Who can they blame now? What excuses do they have? They've had their way, just running a riot for what I think over 10 years now.
I heard they found the bubonic plague on Skid Row.
Yeah, so they started. So what happened? They started. So we love taxing everyone for every single thing. If we can create a tax here, then that's what we do. So we decided to tax. Well, they decided to tax grocery bags. So 5 cents. So they want everyone to have these recyclable type grocery bags. So if you go into the store, you either have your own bag, or you have to pay what was 5 cents, but is now 10 cents for those plastic bags. So what happened though, because we have a huge homeless population, the homeless were taking those bags and they were pooping in them, and then they were throwing them away in the trash can. Sounds kind of gross, right? But it's better than having it on the street. But now that those bags cost money, the homeless started pooping everywhere, and it gets tracked everywhere. And then they started having these outbreaks of like hepatitis B all over. Well, I mean, they're sleeping in the bushes, they're defecating in the bushes. And so now when you hear things like San Francisco, it's true where if you're walking your dog and your dog poops on the street, you'll get a ticket, but you can do it.
Yep, Seattle too. I just moved from Seattle, man. Same kind of thing. They did the same tax thing there with the bags, and they just started letting everybody just camp anywhere they want, basically on the freeway. But if you park, I'll tell you what, you park where you're not supposed to while you're working downtown, they'll give you a fat ticket, and there's no mercy. But these people they're literally just camped on the freeways, on the underpasses, overpasses, exits in the city park, all the city parks. Because they give they used to do a needle exchange, which made kind of sense, made sense in certain circumstances, like so people wouldn't spread disease, but it's not really an answer. But like you could return a needle and get one back. Then they started doing a thing where they just give you a bag of needles. So then that they wouldn't, not an exchange, but literally you could just go there and get a free bag. And so now they're everywhere in the parks. This is awful, man.
Well, and what's even more, I'll tell you the thing that is just blowing me away. I know Seattle rolled this out. They do it in San Fran, New York. I'm not sure if it's LA is doing it yet or not. But they have they've started the injection centers where you can literally go and in the safety protected by the freaking city, you can go shoot up your drugs. I mean,
yeah, it's called a safe injection site.
Yeah, hold the phone.
They had mobile methadone clinics, and then they went to that.
How does that make any sense whatsoever? oh yeah, you can be totally protected, and if you OD, we'll be right here to take care of you, bro. I mean, like, okay, so yeah, that's not going to encourage the aggregation of those people, a la Los Angeles. I mean, LA has no less than 100,000 homeless people. I mean, that's bigger than most metro areas in the United States. 100,000 people. That's
John,
bigger. I mean,
Yes. The crazy part about this whole thing is that, they're saying that Christian societies have problems, even though Christians started hospitals. So atheistic societies start meth hospitals. Like, it's almost like the people that argue for atheism online, they don't look at facts and argue just blindly because what they feel like. I don't know. It's just insane to me.
It's emotional.
Do you know?
But they will say that.
Yeah,
but they're going to say that it's logical, right? They're going to say, no. We think that Christian norms or Christian, like, if you have that in society, it oppresses people. It's worse for the society. Yet they don't realize that atheism leads to complete destruction of society.
It's why they call them bleeding heart liberals.
Yeah.
They raise so much money in Seattle, right? Because I would paint for a big company, and then I did for Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, the different campuses. I mean, there's so much money in that area. They raise so much extra money from all the business there that, like, then they did the things where they'd count the homeless and get an idea how many homeless there were, and they wasted, and the problem actually grew. So more homeless people started living in Seattle than at the beginning of the year. But if they had taken all the money that was supposed to go to that, then the bureaucracy that took the money, they could have given every single accounted for homeless person. I think it was like $50,000 for the year of the money they had, hundreds of millions of dollars. And they didn't. It got worse. The problem worsened under their policies. Worsened.
Oh, dude, the math. If you actually go and do an analysis of the math and the finances behind that are supposedly being directed towards solving the homeless problem, you will just be like, how is there a homeless person in America? Like, we could buy them all $1 million homes. Like, every single homeless person in the United States could have a $1 million house.
Down payment
every year. It's freaking insane. I mean, like, in case of what, here in Nashville, like, there's this little park that's been taken over, turned into a camping zone for homeless people. And they keep, like, clearing it out. They put fencing around, this kind of stuff. Well, our city council this past Tuesday authorized $1.2 million in spending to, like, help prevent them from going into this park. And I'm like, there's 55 of them that are staying in this little park. You guys are going to drop $1.2 million on ways to try to keep them out of the park. Like, for that in that context, like, hey, dumbass, you could pay for an apartment for every single one of them for, like, the next 5 years. They could all live in a decent apartment for that money. Like, what are you doing? Like, this is insane.
Except the homeless by choice. That's what you get. You got to divide them up. Some are homeless by choice. Some are homeless because they're homeless.
That's very true.
They need help. They need help, and so they need to be forced into it, or given very, they need to have help offered to them with that, especially with that kind of money. And they need, the problem is they don't really care about them.
Well, I agree with you. I agree with you. They don't actually. It's a political move. They're trying to placate a niche demographic that lives by there. But my point is that, like, that $1.2 million is on top of the already existing $13 million per year, and that's just the Nashville poverty fund, right? There's a plethora of other money. I mean, just a ridiculous amount of other money that's spent on the homeless problem just here in Nashville. But then they authorize another 1.2 million on top of all this stuff, and I'm like,
well, do you have NIMBYs where you live?
Do I have what?
Do you have NIMBYs? See, the liberals in Seattle, not in my backyard. So they all bitch and moan about it. Then they propose, like, a facility or somewhere, like in a park, to use the land for to put these people in housing. And then anybody who lives in that area is like, no, not in my backyard. But they'll pay out the money, but they don't want the people around them.
Well, I tell you, actually, concept I've been putting a business plan together for the last one of the things I've been doing this past month is because I'm getting so annoyed with this whole deal of, like, what the heck are we doing? The amount of capital is just being flushed, whatever. in my opinion, at this point, voters are just living in fantasy land if they think that government's ever actually going to even try to actually solve the problem. They use it as a mechanism to try and justify more, more capital to be given to the city, which then they never actually solve the problem. So I would think like a business model. But anyway, my point is that the point you just made about not in my backyard is a serious problem, right? However, as nobody's been paying attention, given the current state of our economy, there is a ridiculous amount of commercial property that is sitting empty and warehouses and all that kind of stuff, right? Like you could convert some of those empty warehouse shells, right, into living space for basically turn it into kind of quasi dorms, right? And put homeless people in them and give them. And I'm not saying just like dump them in there. I'm saying like you create models of, education, getting them clean, getting jobs lined up, all that kind of stuff. Actually working on realistic solutions to like help them escape poverty and homelessness for the ones that actually are looking, not the ones, as Andrew was saying, that are like homeless by choice. That's a whole other problem. But the amount, I was doing an analysis of the capital requirement to do something like that. It is negligible. That's why when they pass this $1.2 million like little budget, I'm like, for crying out loud, dude, you could do a build out of a empty warehouse for maybe $200,000 and have it ready for people to live in. This is not that, and I'll tell you on a big scale, not even like a micro scale. But no, we're going to put some extra fencing and some cameras up for $1.2 million. Like, it just blows me away every time. Anyway.
Well, the funny thing is with that, there are two major companies that I know of that set themselves up as not-for-profits by the same guy. He was American. I think his name was Millard Fuller. Anyway, he started Habitat for Humanity, and then he started Fuller Center for Housing. And that was a way of getting out of helping homeless people into homes of their own. And they had a whole thing. And the only reason I remember this was because there's a chapter in Australia that was started, and I was part of it for a little bit as it was reignited. But yeah, I mean, you've got all sorts of other organizations that are doing it. Now, Millard Fuller was a Christian. He got kicked off the board of Habitat for Humanity because they said, you're too old, it's time for you to retire. He said, I've read the whole Bible, there isn't retire in it, so guess what, I'm not going to do it. He reinvented himself as Fuller Center for Housing. But yeah, I agree, it is dumb. The homeless by choice is another story, but the homeless that are homeless because they don't have a home or they can't afford a home, line them up with jobs. I mean, here in Australia, we have the similar problem. And one of the guys that was one of the partners set up in one of the local areas in Beenleigh. But of course, he was met with the same scenario that you're presenting here, not in my backyard. So basically, they say, oh, this is a great concept. Can we do it? Yes, we can, but not in my backyard, and eventually you can't find a place to do it.
Yeah. Well, and then on the flip side, you have politicians who won't allow for like rezoning of like commercial property to, because I mean, you gotta think about it, like in a warehouse district, if you could get special allowances from a zoning perspective to be able to do something in a, convert something like that into a place, housing for homeless, there's nobody else living around there, right? So yeah. Obviously the businesses might have concerns for having a bunch of, whack jobs, crazy people put in there. However, there's ways you can account for that, right? Like we're going to put cameras freaking everywhere. We're going to have security protocols and different things that are, put in place and to address those issues, because at the end of the day, the criminals are going to be coming in there anyway. So you have to account for security in that context. But I'm not saying that's something you wouldn't have to account for. However, that's got to be an easier hurdle to overcome than dealing with, traditionally residential areas. I mean,
yeah, it seems like you could find a loophole where you could still leave it zoned as commercial, but, call your business some sort of maybe commercial high density homeless shelter. So it still falls under that commercial umbrella. And then that way you might even be able to avoid some of these strenuous codes. I know here, things have to meet like a HUD type criteria, and that makes things difficult because they have minimal square footages and things like that. So There's a lot of things to try to get around.
I was thinking just because this would kind of tie into people that do not want to work, they just want to live that lifestyle. And I was thinking, I wonder if there's any statistics on people that were prisoners and came out of the prison system and rehabilitated their lives, and if how much of them were religious and how much weren't, and see the success rate. I wonder if there's any kind of data on that, because that would almost fly in the face of that whole argument of that religion is bad for, even though there's enough studies that religion improves people's lives. But I'm just saying, even in that sense, just to kind of take away that argument from those atheists that,
there actually
do
is
that.
data. There is. I'm not. I don't have the exact numbers on top of my head, but my parents actually, they've been working with the one of the many Christian prison ministries organizations for the last, like, I don't know, 20 years. And now that they're retired, they're like doing it. It's pretty amazing all the stuff they're doing with it. But anyway, that's why we were actually talking about that the other day, that the recidivism rate of people that go through their program and actually find Christ, in this context, but when they come out, the probability of them being able to rehabilitate into society and not go back to crime is just, it's off the charts compared to other people, right, that don't go through it. So the point you're making, I think, has been validated. I'll have to see if they can reach out to some of the folks that do all that analysis and get some actual numbers on that.
Yeah, I think it's a great information to have, just in case Matt Dillahunty brings up that religion is bad for people. That's why I'm fighting against it. Kind of just point out just facts that they can't dispute, and it'll just kind of take the steam out of their arguments.
Yeah.
Well, they don't have an argument, because we were talking about this all day long with these critics. Outside of the biblical context, how are they defining what's good and bad, and what moral framework are they using to substantiate that assertion that anything can be bad? Everything turns arbitrary. Good and bad only makes sense in the context of the biblical worldview. Outside of that, what is it? What do you mean by that when you say something is bad? I don't understand.
Yeah, so I agree with you, but there's the issue with arguing logically with people that do not understand logic. That's why I'm thinking, like, it's great to have like logical, kind of run through it, and then just a cherry on top, smack down their arguments, and there's no recovering from, data that they cannot dispute.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're personally looking for data, you can go to the Encyclopedia of Wars. You could see that I think it's 96, maybe 93 or 96% of all wars were atheistic in nature. And then of the religious wars, most of those are not, in fact, Christians. And then with the Christian wars, the Christians were going to war with people that we've labeled as terrorists today. So there's some facts for you.
No, I agree with you completely. The only reason I bring this aspect up is just because their whole arguments, at least from what I heard, was mostly about society, that it's bad for society, Christianity, or even like Christian standards or Christian morals, that they're bad for society, which is ridiculous.
Well, they like to argue that somehow, I have a higher income, therefore nothing about my ability to have that higher income has anything to do with the religious ethos and principles and moral compass that dominates, well, actually enabled my civilization that I'm currently employed in to reach the level where I can be employed. It's like you guys are like off your rocker, and it's kind of like all the folks who claim like, New York State is less restrictive and socialism is awesome and less this religious crap. Everybody's better off in New York because you're making, the average income is higher. And it's like, okay, well, number one, let's look at New York right now because everybody's running away from it. But number two, when you actually look at the like cost of living differentiation, all that kind of stuff, it's like, yeah, congratulations, your average income is higher than in this other state, but your actual purchasing power is equal to or less than, right, in terms of what's left over after your cost of living adjustments and taxes and everything else. It's like, come on now, let's actually look at this not just on like the absolute outer shell of the surface and go a few layers in, and you recognize that these talking points are not actually as, backed up as they like to claim they are. And I mean, I grew up in Europe. I spent the first 18 years of my life in England, and I have zero desire to go back to England. Like, not a chance. I mean, I love to go back and visit and stuff, but I have zero intention of ever wanting to go back and like live in the UK. Not a chance. Compared to the United States, not a freaking chance. I mean, I've traveled over Germany. I mean, Germany is pretty free. Germany, well, now Germany, heck no. Back in the like 90s and stuff, Germany, yeah, it was pretty awesome. But like what it has turned into now, heck no. France, not a prayer, man. I mean, even before all the shutdowns of the last 2 years, I mean, the French had, and it was spreading across Europe, but I mean, the yellow vest protests were happening, every freaking weekend because of the lunacy that's been happening in France. And it's stuff that Americans haven't even, we haven't even had experienced this stuff. And it drives me up the wall listening to all these talking heads on TV talk about how horrible the United States is. I'm like, you guys are freaking clown shows who live in little tiny bubbles and live gated behind gigantic walls, and then talk about how horrible it is for everybody else. Like, come on, man. It's just, the hypocrisy pisses me off.
Yeah, I think the only reason I bring this up is because I think people should, at least from the Christian side, they should maybe design quick and easy, like memorable quotes so it sticks in people's heads, just like a saying that, this much people come out of prison, Christianity, way more successful, or some kind of really, really catchy. And I think that will help move the argument way farther, because then the atheists will not be able to bring the same exact argument over and over and over again. They'll have to actually either come up with new ones or stick to logic.
Well, there actually was a prison, I think it's in Texas. They fell apart. You actually got a knife when you went into the place to defend yourself. They approached one warden, and the warden said, I'll take the job on these conditions. Conditions were like the scriptures are on the walls. You start a theology. You start giving these guys directions. You're taking the knives out. You're doing all of these things and basically changing the prison session, the whole prison environment altogether. And basically what happened was the government ended up saying, okay, we can't get anybody else to take this away. You go ahead. And he did it. Now, his name was Warden Cass, I think his name was. And basically he reformed that whole entire prison with Christianity. So that's one example. But also there's the other flip side of this homeless situation. I actually wonder how many of them have undiagnosed mental conditions as well. This is a problem, because they used to have homes where they put them, and then they'd shut the homes down, and people would be out on the streets again.
Yeah, they don't all fit into one group, that's for sure.
Yeah, we closed all the mental health hospitals. And actually, it's ironic. Before all that, they got shut down. California actually had the leading mental health facilities of anywhere in the world, in terms of the number of facilities and such. And then they got rebranded as and in some cases justifiably, in other cases unjustifiably. The
Democrats. That's what
the stereotype as. The stereotypes, right? And now it's they're gone.
It's the Democrats because they're evil.
Yeah, that's what it says. They rebranded them all as Democratic.
What's up, Iger? How you doing?
Hey, man, I'm so happy to see you, bro. Where the heck have you been, bro? I missed you so much.
Man, I've been busy. I've had a lot of stuff going on, but Gonna try and get back into it. Well, basically, what it boils down to is Sam got me onto Clubhouse. Atheists pissed me off, and now I'm back. So that's basically what it boils down to. Oh,
yeah,
actually,
you're back.
actually, Jamie actually gets credit for the first portion of it, because Jamie posted a video clip of Pine Creek saying by name that I don't know how to think, and so that was the other thing that really pissed me off. So basically, Pine Creek and a couple what's his face, this Patrick Voss guy, have irritated me to the point where I've stopped ignoring the atheists, and I'm back. So
Yeah,
that's where
you
it
gotta
is.
ignore them, bro. You gotta ignore all these haters, because if you got haters, then you're doing something right, bro. So just brush
No,
them
you
off to
can't.
the side, bro. Focus on the big fish. Bill Nye.
Yeah, you can't ignore them because then
Bill
he'll be
Gates.
not doing live streams.
Huh? They join your live streams?
Well, and Dr. Kenny is in the house, and he says, "I know. I got to go home when the funny farms were closed here in Cali."
That explains it. John, did I send you that in an email?
No, but your channel. I'm subscribed to your channel, and it like popped up in my feed.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear.
Yeah,
Either
dude,
way,
I
man, I'm
subbed,
glad you're back, bro.
I subbed to your channel like right when you started it.
Put a link in the chat, Jamie. I don't think that I'm
Yeah, that'd be cool.
subscribed to you. I'm not sure if I am or not.
Yeah, definitely is subscribed to CJ's channel too. Iger's here, and I'll put it in the side thing. Thanks.
Yeah. CJ's been doing a bunch. I mean, CJ's doing streams out the wazoo, man. He's like almost doing something every day, I think, these days.
Yeah, actually, I've almost just about every single day I have, and pretty consistent, at least 150, 200 people each time too. So, which is, that's been pretty cool so far.
Oh wow, that's great, man. That's awesome.
Thank you. I got a question for you guys, because I got a debate that is coming up that made just interested to know what people think. How do you feel about the idea that Santa is satanic?
Santa is satanic, bro.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Can I we actually just had a conversation in our family about this, except not specifically Santa, but Christmas trees, because in our family we're kind of pretty conservative, and my family never puts up Christmas trees. And anyway, and so I told him this view right here. I think my view on it is that it depends on the person's context. Just like somebody could have an argument saying that there's an Apple phone, that Apple is a bite mark. Somebody can be like, see, that's satanic because it's Garden of Eden and all that. So I think it's in context, because I don't think Santa directly ties into some kind of satanic thing. I think it's just commercial marketing. They're trying to make a place to sell things, and I think that's what happened.
No historical connection there, I would guess.
Yeah.
I haven't put up a Christmas tree for years, but I don't think I wouldn't tell anybody it's wrong, because like you said, context matters. But I actually was convinced by when I saw IP, Inspiring Philosophy, who I obviously have disagreements with. I did find his arguments fairly good for the historical. I mean, I forget if it was Christmas and Easter, and like people misuse that verse about the trees. Now it's the same kind of concept. I forget what verse it is, but
Yeah, decorating the trees and stuff.
yeah. And so how to interpret that, I would say, context matters, right? And so I don't think there's a direct connection. Like God's literally outright saying you shouldn't have a Christmas tree, although I don't usually put one up, but I think they're fine.
Yeah, same thing here. I think the bigger point is, if somebody thinks it's a sin, it will be a sin for them, just because their conscience will make them feel guilty or whatever. Just like I think Paul talks about idols or things that are sacrificed to idols. He mentions it as, for one person, it's nothing, because idols are nothing. But if you see somebody stumbling because of you, you should refrain from it. Or if somebody tells you directly, hey, let's go worship join us in this worship, and they tell you it is for a pagan god, don't do it. And he's like, not because idols or something, it's just that they do it for demons, right? And so I think it really depends on context. Because I think Christianity specifically is a very, very no hard rules, besides like the ones that are set up directly. The other ones are kind of like what's on your conscience about it, or your conscience says about it.
Yeah, if it was just me personally, I wouldn't set up a Christmas tree. Not because I think it's like satanic or anything else but the whole it's to me, I think Christmas is it's very commercialized, and it's almost like very very secular, and I think everyone misses the whole point. So if it was me personally, but my wife, like, she wants to do the Christmas trees, so that's fine, and the kids and all of that stuff. So that's fine. Happy spouse, happy house. And so we do it, but I mean, I make it a point to let my kids know what Christmas is about, and we're not taking Christ out of the Christmas. But I do get frustrated when I go to places to get certain decorations, and all I can see is Santa Claus and snowman and pine trees and all of this stuff. But we're like, where's the Jesus? Where's the nativity scene? That bothers me.
My boss has a blow up Santa, lit up Santa thing, right, with the snowman and the reindeer and Santa, and then right next to it is a nativity blow up thing right next to it.
Yeah, it's like, okay, all right, are the atheists? They're not going to celebrate Christmas, right? They're going to be consistent and they're going to go to work. No, that's not the case. but it's very again, commercialized. Imagine if it was your birthday, right? And you go to a birthday party and everyone's there and everyone's shopping and all these presents, but like no one gives them any presents to you, and everyone just ignores you. Wait, what just happened? And that's kind of what I feel Christmas kind of turns into if we're not careful. And I think that's the problem with it. But as far as Santa Claus being demonic or a Christmas tree being demonic, not in my family. I don't think it is in my
pagan.
family.
It's not necessarily demonic, but it's all pagan customs. Since the Vatican, what was his name, Constantine, switched to Christianity. But what he did was he mixed a lot of the pagan holidays with the Christian holidays. Well, there's a lot of videos that Jesus' birthday was in the fall. A lot of people think it was on September 11th, 3 BC, because of the ways the stars aligned back in that day. But if you look at Christmas, I guess there's something called Saturnalia, where it's what the pagans used to worship, where they celebrate, gave each other presents, whatnot. So our whole traditions have been, Satan has been at work to deceive mankind for a long time, about 6,000 years. And so he's been mixing up even Christianity traditions, where he's got us worshiping on the wrong days, where we worship, Easter is another one. So
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you one point, that yes, we have lost the dates, but there's one issue with this, is that even Paul, when he talks about like worshiping on, if somebody does not hold to the different holidays, he's like, you're doing it for God. If you hold to the holidays, you're doing it for God. So he's literally saying that it's not the dates that matter, it's your heart that matters.
Right.
So you can't. So if, let's say somebody celebrates Christmas and they do the Santa and everything, but they make sure that they mention that this stuff right here is nothing, it's about Christ, then it doesn't matter. But if somebody comes to it as, oh no, I gotta be really careful because this thing could come from here, we would have to do like so much heavy research on everything. Because let's say I heard this thing, I'm not sure if it's true. I heard that like little kitty was started by some weird mom that kind of had some kind of weird situation, and it was like demonic or devilish or something like that. That's some kind of kitty company, and it was a big deal in the community that I hung out with, because they care about those kind of things. And I'm like, well, literally Paul talks about this. If you go to the market and you're buying meat and it was sacrificed to idols, don't worry about it. But
yeah, you'd have to. Oh, I mean, you'd have to remove yourself from society if everything that was connected with something non-biblical was not allowed. How could you put on a single piece of clothing? How could
Well,
you
the
do
other
anything?
thing, though, too, I think that is kind of so, and this is actually because the reason I'm taking the debate is because I actually don't think I agree with a lot of you guys that it's not like pagan or satanic or stuff like that. And actually, I would kind of with some of the stuff that Iger was saying, I'd actually push back on a lot of that. I know the history of the holidays quite well, and honestly, I think what happened is like the History Channel and Dan Brown and a bunch of other pop culture guys kind of started pushing this idea that the holidays were pagan, and they were so commercialized that nobody had any idea how to refute them and tell them otherwise. You know what I mean? And so everybody just kind of accepted the whole Christmas is pagan idea without any sort of thought, right? Like the Saturnalia example is a kind of a good example, actually. Saturnalia is not on December 25th; it's on December 17th.
Wait, it's on what? September 15th?
December 17th.
Oh, December. So it's something to do with the solstice, bro. Like whenever the solstice is, that's they're like sun worshippers. So
but the solstice isn't on the 25th either. The solstice is on the 21st.
Yeah. So it's all around that time or whatever. So maybe the dates got shuffled around a little bit with the switch of calendars or whatnot. But it seems like that's the main event.
The reason that doesn't really work though is because the solstice, the solstice doesn't change when the calendar changes. The dates change around the calendar, right? Or around the solstice rather. But the solstice is on the same point in the year every year.
Correct.
So, if the calendar changed, it wouldn't be that we would get the different date and now we'd be celebrating this date and we'd have another date that was the solstice. We'd be following the solstice and our date would change, right? So if we were celebrating the solstice on the 17th and we changed the calendar to the 21st, then we would change the celebration to be the 21st, right? We wouldn't keep the 17th and then, what I mean? It's just not how the calendar works.
But the interesting part about this, if we as Christians say that, no, this date is important, it can't be tied, we should leave cinema completely. Because most of those cinema stories are based on terrible ideas and like pretty much demonic stuff, right? Yet we're willing to go watch a interesting movie, right? But we don't want to. Well, this is demonic and this is not. So it's almost a hypocritical. I don't know. That's my view on it. Is if you're gonna be like, I will be super pure about this stuff. Well, then you should look into the other parts of our lives that we kind of let slide.
Right, like do you like Thor comic books? Because that's as directly influenced from paganism as you get, right?
Yeah, exactly. I actually was talking to a guy in prison, and he literally believes in Thor and those stuff. And I'm like, holy smokes, how do I get across to this person?
Well, they were defeated in Ragnarok. They're all lesser gods. They're gods within creation.
They're all the fallen angels from Genesis 6.
So his God lost, unfortunately. And Valhalla might be a little bit accurate description, where you go and you battle for eternity, but it's not going to be a good thing like they want it to be.
That's true. I sent him Michael Heiser's book to kind of get him a claim, at least that mindset. Then I'll have to talk to him again.
But imagine if you said, okay, like we can't celebrate Christmas at all. Again, like I'm not a fan of the Christmas tree. I'm not a fan of Santa. Okay, but the Christmas time I think is a good time for Christianity and Christians as a whole, because it's really hard for the critic to avoid. So what's the solution? Have no Christmas celebration and have no Easter? Oh man, we're giving up a lot right there.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And you know what else too? I think that the real shame of this is this concession started hundreds of years ago. Like if I told you guys that Halloween was a Christian holiday, you might not believe me, but it's like 100% true. Like if you actually study the history of Halloween, right? It was a day that Christians came together to kind of have a memorial for the martyrs and to look forward to the day when they wouldn't be slaughtered every single day, which we live in now. So now we sort of live in that future. And but over time it gets corrupted with all this, death, and let's, commercialize it into the nth extent to where nobody has any idea what it's about, and then eventually Christians, instead of fighting for their day, they kind of just give up, and they're like, well, maybe we don't need an October holiday. We'll just keep the one that we have, which is Christmas. And then it happens to Christmas, and then you give that one up, and it's like, eventually you're just not going to have any more holidays.
But even with Halloween, I mean, we celebrate that as harvest, like through our church, and we'll do an outreach then to try to give an alternative to what everyone's going to do. So in a sense, like, yeah, we want to take that holiday also, and we want to make that a Christian thing. So I don't see the harm in that either.
Yeah, totally. I'll tell you, because I feel that 100%. And what I'll do is I celebrate sort of Halloween and Reformation Day as a single holiday. And so what we'll do is we'll have a memorial, not in a vigilistic kind of way, but in a Memorial Day kind of way, or Veterans Day kind of way, for martyrs. And then also, the Reformation being on October 31st, that's sort of like the day that religion really became free in the West, or at least that it started, right? On the same day we but have memorial for the martyrs. We also celebrate the fact that we now live in a future that, allows us to not be martyrs. And so it sort of has, and if the children around want to dress her up in Christian appropriate costumes, that's fine.
Right.
None of the death stuff, of course, because that's just completely nonsense. But and honestly, what's crazy about it is a lot of my secular friends really enjoy the Halloweens we have here. Right? They know that they can't have any of the sexy stuff or the creepy stuff or anything like that, and we're not drinking or anything, but it's just it's a holiday that is primarily religious in nature, and it's communal, and they'll come celebrate with us, you know what I mean? And it's like, I almost think that's sort of proof positive that people don't even, as much as the devil tries to take over these sorts of things, it's not like people like it. Right, like you notice people don't celebrate Christmas very much anymore. It's because once it becomes commercialized, it's just like a dead husk. You know what I mean? And it's like, why am I even doing this? It's just a thing. It's an excuse to get drunk, or do something else that's stupid. You know what I mean? Because that's what a holiday becomes at that point. But like when you actually have meaning behind it, I think people kind of, they really gravitate towards that. And I think it's a pretty awesome witnessing opportunity, personally.
Actually, I really like that idea. Just because people need heroes to look up to, just to strive, like Paul says, follow. Sorry, I have to translate this from Ukrainian and Russian because I read the Bible mostly in Russian. So he pretty much says do what I do, or follow my example, like I follow Christ's example. Just people need real life examples or heroes. So to celebrate, heroes of the martyrs or something, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this debate with the Santa thing is going to be fun, actually, because I don't think that Santa is pagan, but at the same time, I'm also not a real big fan of the Santa myth. So I'll kind of be, presenting this idea of, well, let's be honest, but also let's remember what the reason for the season sort of thing is. And I'm hoping it sells. Good.
When's your debate?
That's going to be, I think it's Sunday. Modern day debate is Sunday.
All right. Well, who are you debating? Because I'm more on the other side where, I think we need to get back to like the original holidays, like the Feast of Trumpets and, the Sabbath Saturday. All the other holidays that we had before, we got basically, I think we're all following what the Vatican did, and the Roman Catholicism. We're following on their holidays, and they corrupted the whole system. So I think we need to get back to like the biblical holidays. I'm not saying I've done it, but I'm saying I think that's probably what God would want, is for us to follow the holidays He established.
Well, so a couple things. So first thing, just to answer your question, Alex Stein
No
Conspiracy
way.
Castle. So that's sort of the, and it'll be fun. I'm not taking the debate as seriously as I do other ones. It's kind of a practice debate in a lot of ways. But so yeah, that'll be the debate. Second thing, just so you know, I'm actually all for the biblical feast days also.
There's like 6 or 7, no? Like the Feast of Trumpets, something
there's
Tabernacles.
5 Mosaic, and then Purim and Hanukkah. And I'm personally of the opinion that, holidays are fun. So if you want to celebrate them, celebrate them. I celebrate all the Jewish holidays as well as the traditional American holidays.
Are you going to take that 7th Jubilee year off completely? The whole year?
Well, not the.
Isn't Jubilee every 50 years or 49 years?
Jesus is on Jubilee.
Every 7th year, I think they took a whole year off.
Well, no, so there's two different things. So the Jubilee is once every 50, like Iger's saying, but then there's also a Sabbath year for farmland, which is once every 7 years.
Yeah, that's right. They had to rotate. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Can you tell me the other? Since we got you here, can you tell me what the other, the biblical holidays are? You said the Feast of Trumpets, the Tabernacles, and what else?
Yeah. So there's starting off on the Jewish calendar is Pesach, which is Passover. That's usually March, April area. Then you have Shavuot, which is the Festival of Weeks. That's usually around your May, June area. That's followed by Yom Teruah. Yom Teruah is actually often called Rosh Hashanah in the modern day, but it's not called Rosh Hashanah in the Bible. It's the Festival of Trumpets, and it's sort of like the calling before the Day of Atonement, which is your next holiday, Yom Kippur, with that very same Day of Atonement, right? Then you have
September time, September, no?
Yeah, all these 3 in a row are all going to be September area. Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot are all in the 10-day period, actually. And they're all in your September, August area. Sometimes it's actually September, October area, later area.
A lot of people, like when I was doing the Jesus was born September 11, 3 BC stuff, looking into that, then people were saying how it was like on the Feast of Trumpets that Jesus was born as well. I don't know how they came up with that, but I don't know. What's the other holidays, bro?
After Yom Kippur is Sukkot. That's the Day of Trumpets. Not Day of Trumpets, the Feast of Tabernacles, Feast of Booths or Tabernacles. And those are the 5 that are instituted by Moses. Then next you have Hanukkah, which of course everybody knows that one, right?
But that one's like post Bible, no? Or is it like?
Yeah, that was established by the Maccabees when they rededicated the temple. And Jesus did celebrate that holiday as well in John 10. But it's not an explicitly biblical holiday. And then the last one is Purim. And Purim is going to be February, March area, and that's the one from the book of Esther, the Festival of Lots.
Okay, so we got five biblical holidays that we don't know because we're so brainwashed to follow Easter and Christmas and all the other holidays that we've been programmed to believe in.
Well, so see, and that's where I would kind of push back a little bit though, because I totally am with you as far as celebrate the biblical holidays if you want to. I don't think anybody should be forced to, but if they want to, I think it's it's fun to celebrate and they're good biblical holidays, obviously.
And it's nice to. Sorry, I want to throw in an idea that it's nice to see how they point to Christ, the old biblical ones.
Yeah, definitely, 100% feel you there. And to see his fulfillment of them too, I think is also very beautiful. In fact, so I take somewhat of a minority opinion. I actually think Jesus was born on December 25th. If you asked me that 2 months ago, I would not have told you that was the answer, but I think that the evidence is pretty solid that he actually was born on December 25th, and that's an accurate tradition. When you talk about the stuff like the pagan origins and stuff like that, and the Vatican and Constantine and stuff,
It's Saturn
It's all
maybe.
like pop culture. You know what I mean? Like it really doesn't have basis in history.
What's that guy that looks like Satan, bro? And they celebrate him, I think, in Austria, Krinkros or something like that.
Are you talking about
Krinkros used to walk together, and the bad kids would get Krinkros or whatever the Satan-looking thing is.
Are you talking about
Krampus? Get Satan. Yeah. And
yeah,
then,
Krampus.
so I don't know, bro. I've been watching a lot just because it's around Christmas time. I guess I get a lot of stuff on my feed about that, and I don't know, bro. I'm kind of on the side where I will say I don't agree with Alex Stein, bro. Like I don't even think he's a Christian, but he thinks the Earth is flat, moon landings are fake. So he kind of agrees with me in a lot of stuff, but there's something fishy for me with like when people come to a flat Earth conclusion, they don't accept Christianity. I think there's something there's something weird about that. Like I don't know what to say, bro. They're like agents or something. I don't know, but anyways, bro, I'll let you get back to your thing, back on this topic.
Oh no, you're fine. I mean, this isn't even my stream, right? So you can interrupt me all you want.
Man, I want to root for Alex Stein, but he gives me like a weird vibe all the time. I don't know, like he's so wild and out there. He reminds me of like an Alex Jones, almost like they put somebody out there. That way, when people see him, they just like these people are crazy and nuts, and they won't look any further into it. You know what I mean? He gives me that vibe. Like anybody that comes across anything, and then they run into a character like Alex Stein, and they're so wild and just crazy, bro, and it's like it's gonna turn people off just to people like that I feel like are put there on purpose just to throw you off the trail, so that way you won't look into stuff any further. But I do agree with a lot of stuff he says, but he's just so wild.
Well, and if you're interested, I would advise you just try to watch the debate if you are interested in watching the debate with an open mind, because really when it comes to the pagan arguments for holidays, I'm telling you, man, there's really nothing there. I'll just give an example with Christmas, since that's what we're talking about. What do you think is the most, let's actually take a poll of the room. If you had to guess, what would you say is the most pagan part about Christmas? Is it Santa, the date?
You got Santa, you got the trees, you got the giving of gifts, you got the whole equinox lining up there.
All right, so you wouldn't pick one, you just say the whole line of things.
Yeah, it's
say the tree.
That throws me off with Christmas. When I first heard about it, that just started clicking in my head. And like you said, you even questioned it 2 years ago. So what's your proof that Jesus was born on December 25th? I never heard any proof for that.
So there's a couple things. So first off, let me address some of the things you'd said. So first, giving of gifts, right? I think we can ignore that one pretty easily, right? Because that would just eliminate any possible festive gathering whatsoever, right? Anytime you decided to be nice to your girlfriend, well, you're apparently pagan at that point, right? So we can kind of just get rid of that one pretty quickly. The equinox and solstice thing, well, that's not true, right? The December 25th is actually after the solstice, which is important, because if you think about it, if everybody's celebrating the solstice and you want to start this new holiday, why would you put it after the solstice, right? I don't know about you, but after Christmas, I'm kind of beat. You know what I mean? Like I'm pooped out. I'm done with holidays. It's been a stressful event. It's been great. Don't get me wrong, but it's also
got New Year's right around the corner, and then you look at New Year's too, and it's New Year's is really in like March or whatever. You know what I mean? And then but they got us brainwashed to think that New Year's is in the end of the winter.
It's a separate point though, right? Because let's just stick to the thing you're on right now, right? As far as
hey guys, real quick before you guys get into this. So I am gonna go to sleep because I told myself when I started doing streams again, I was not going to jack up my sleep schedule. So you guys can keep going, have fun. When I say thanks to everybody in the audience for being subs to the channel, even though I've been gone for a while, I appreciate you guys coming back like I never left. Thank you so much. Thanks very much to all the members who stay with me as well. And hope everybody has a great night. And hope we'll do much more of these going forward in the future. So have fun, everybody. And I trust everybody in the stream. Nobody goes nuts. And stay off the topic of the things that are like not accepted by the algorithm, and yada yada yada. Okay, anyway, appreciate everybody, and as I always say when I leave, make sure the conclusions you reach are logical, plausible, and probable. And have a good night, everybody.
Bye, John.
Yeah, God bless you, man.
Thanks for
Hey, I'm
coming
gonna-
back, bro.
I'm
I
gonna
really
say-
did miss you.
Love you, John.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
I'm going to say goodnight also, but I am going to listen to you respond to those things, CJ. But my answer would be the Christmas tree. If I was to guess, I would say that too. So, good night, everyone.
Hey,
Good night. Have a good rest of the night.
I'm gonna go out too because I told myself I'm not gonna stay up to 3 a.m. again, and here I am.
Dang, man.
It's just hard to get off it once you, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good conversation. This time is actually a really good stream. Awesome conversation. So yeah, but I am gonna head to bed. I probably have to get up early again tomorrow. So gotta get a bunch of stuff ready at my house for Christmas. So you guys let me know if I'm allowed to put a Christmas tree up. I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna put it up because my parents will kill me.
I will say, man, like most of us work, bro. Like we all work, right? And so we get a little bit of time off to spend with the family. Like there's nothing more precious than that. So yeah, enjoy the time with your family no matter what you believe, you know. Don't try to make fights with your family members or whatever on some little whatever you might think. But yeah, enjoy your family while you can.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it was nice talking to you guys. CJ, I think it's been a few times I've seen you, so it was nice seeing you again.
Yeah, you as well. God bless.
All right, I'll listen in for sure until I fall asleep. But yeah, thanks.
Absolutely. Well, and I do appreciate John letting me kind of stay on for a minute to just sort of get this small little rant out.
Go for it, bro. I'll try to give you a little pushback because I haven't really studied the topic, but I have been seeing a lot of stuff just randomly pop up on my stream about it. But I'm not prepared for it. So go ahead, fight back, bro.
So the first thing is just that, well, we've already gotten 2 down, right? So you have the gift giving, and that's just kind of a thing that happens on holidays. And then you have the equinoxes, or it's actually the solstices in this case. But Christmas isn't actually on the solstice, right? It's actually after the solstice, which if you wanted to replace it, you would put it either on or before the solstice, because putting it after would be kind of just like a PR nightmare. But then, so the other things that were mentioned were Santa and the trees, right?
And that devil-looking guy.
So, yeah, and Krampus is he's really specific, right? In other words, Krampus is a specifically German thing. And if we were in Germany, that would probably be an area of worthy discussion. But honestly, since we're in America, it's not a tradition that impacts us very much. You know what I mean? Now, that being said, Krampus isn't actually based in paganism either. He is based in a pretty weird children's fable, for sure. And I would not teach my kids Krampus if I was a German Christian. I'll be honest with you. I don't think that is. I think that's a little bit grotesque. But to be just technically accurate about it, it did actually start as a German Christian tradition, a German Christian fable, as like sort of the anti-Santa, and that was after the already existing legend of Sinterklaas, which is where we get Santa Claus, which then brings me then to Santa Claus, right? And I'm not going to say too much about it just because obviously I have the debate coming up, right? I want to keep people tuned. But the origin of Santa Claus is actually so the Dutch venerated a saint named Nicholas, right? Nicholas was a saint born in what we would now today call Turkey, but back then they would call it Anatolia. And he
What did they call Turkey? I'm sorry.
Say
Anatolia?
again?
You said Anatolia?
Yeah, Anatolia. And he was a bishop in the region who was an avid defender of the deity of Christ and was one of the surviving bishops through the persecutions. Some people say he was at the Council of Nicaea, but there's not actually really any evidence for that. In fact, we have a list of all the bishops, and he's not on the list, so he probably wasn't actually there. But some people think he was. But nonetheless, he was known for being very generous and giving presents to the poor. and to children. And so that's where the those associations ended up coming from. And the Dutch had a particular affinity for Saint Nicholas, which is interesting because he was never anywhere near the Netherlands in his life, but nonetheless, they had a particular affinity for him, and they would call him Sinterklaas, which you can see that Saint Nicholas, right? Sinterklaas.
Yeah.
And he was this sort of Christmas bishop, right? Who wore a really bright red bishop's costume, just like any other bishop would in any other church, and would give people, specifically good children, gifts around Christmas time, right? And he's, like I said, he's specifically based on this St. Nicholas character, but he just kind of morphs into a little bit of a fable, right? So fast forward into the 1800s, and there's a lot of Dutch immigrants in New York City, and they wanted to kind of retake Christmas because Christmas in America had kind of become a little bit of a party day. Like, it wasn't really a holiday anymore. It was more like a day to get drunk and go make merry. And so the religious people and the conservative people were like, hey, this was, the holiday of our youth, and it's supposed to be a church day and all that. So they wanted to take it back. And so they had a PR campaign that they started, which was this Santa Claus character. And they based it off of Sinterklaas from their native country, right? And they changed a little bit about him because they didn't want him to be looking too Catholic, right? The bishop costume kind of made people think of Catholics. So they changed him to have a standard Dutch costume at the time, which we now know as the standard Santa costume, right? With the big red costume, the belt buckle, and all that kind of stuff. And that's sort of where that ended up going there, right? But the associations of Santa with like the All Father or Yolnir or any of that kind of stuff, right? It's just not true. All it is you had a saint who started having stories told about him, and then in a advertising campaign, somebody created a children's character based off of the stories which were based off of the saint. You know what I mean? But it has no association with paganism at all. The Christmas tree then, and so that would be your next one. The Christmas tree is actually a fun one because the Christmas tree is actually anti-pagan. The symbol, it's explicitly anti-pagan if you study the history. The saint named Boniface. Now, and by the way, you have to understand, none of these guys were called saint in their lifetime, right? The Catholic Church likes to claim that these people were Catholic, but they weren't, right? Boniface was not Catholic. Nicholas was not Catholic. Patrick was not Catholic. Valentine was not Catholic. The Catholic Church didn't even exist back then.
What year was Saint Nick?
Saint Nicholas would have died around the 350s AD. But yeah, the Catholic Church did not exist, and that's even when people say, well, the Catholic Church was established by Constantine. That's not true. The Catholic Church wouldn't exist for another 300 years after Constantine.
Well, when did Constantine do his counts? That was like around the same time, no? Like 300 AD.
325 is when he would have been.
325 or 225?
325, yeah. So in 325, he'd have the Council of Nicaea, and the just to give you an example of how far that is from when we could say we have a functioning Catholic Church. Papal infallibility was not actually set in stone until 607, and that's not even in stone. The thing is it's not really set in stone until the 1800s. But if you want to talk about when the popes start considering themselves to be infallible, Pope Boniface III in 607 AD started actually referring to himself as the infallible vicar of Christ. But that's 300 years after Constantine, right? So Constantine definitely did some damage, but you got to understand, when the Catholic Church tries to have this claim over Christian history, like all these different saints were Catholic, and like all these holidays are Catholic and all, it's just nonsense. It's pure mythology, right? Peter wasn't a pope, and the church fathers were not Catholics, and the holidays are not Catholics.
Yeah, it does irk me when people say Peter was the first pope or whatever. I'm like, well, the Catholic Church didn't even exist in Jesus's day. Like,
exactly,
it's ridiculous, bro. Yeah, that does irk me.
But like, so
I was a Catholic, and now I'm like anti-Catholic, where I think that's where the seat of Satan is. You know, that's where all the secret societies stem from.
Yeah, and I don't even necessarily disagree with that to a large extent. But now to the point of this tree, though, right? So Saint Boniface, he went to go preach to Norwegian pagans, right? And they had a tree where they worshipped Odin. And they would go to this tree and they'd worship Odin, and they'd say, you know, nobody can desecrate this tree, nobody can touch this tree, because if they do, then Odin's going to strike them dead. And Boniface started to make the argument to them because he was witnessing. He says, you know, Odin doesn't exist, and you guys are praying to a piece of wood. And you know, they obviously say, you know, this guy's blaspheming and all this kind of stuff. And so he went and he actually cut down the tree and then put it in the fire and made a bonfire. And then in its place, he planted a evergreen tree, and he put a church in the area as well. And the pagans started to convert to Christ, seeing that their deity was clearly false. So when people say the Christmas tree is pagan, that's like particularly funny, right? Because the Christmas tree is specifically anti-pagan. It's actually a symbol of the conquest of pagan religions through peaceful means, of course. Boniface wasn't violent. And you know, that's the direct opposite of what we try to accuse it of, right?
Yeah, because you know, you put the lights around it and decorate it and stuff like that, and I think that's more of the thing about it than just having a tree, because trees are God made. So, but putting, you know, decorating it and whatnot, it's all, I think that's more tied with the paganism.
Well, see, that would be just kind of, the thing is, you got to always remember what these kinds of arguments are, right? It may seem at first like something might seem pagan because of a certain line of reasoning, but start questioning the line of reasoning, right? So, like, why is a Christmas tree pagan? I mean, you could say, well, decoration of the tree and fancy stuff seems to be like, you know, it's idolatrous, but wouldn't that make painting idolatrous, or putting up a picture of your grandma idolatrous, or even having a nice little candle design on your bookshelf? You know what I mean? Like, you have the candle set up in such a way that it looks nice on your bookshelf. You know, that's all decoration.
Right.
And you know, when you want to talk about like candles and incense and stuff like that, the pagans love to do stuff with candles and incense. You know what I mean? And so it's like, we got to be careful not to, you know, just label these things as just, you know, overall pagan, because the pagans might have done something that's similar. A lot of people are going to do things that are similar. In fact, I'll even just give you another good example that's straight up from the Bible. Sukkot is a harvest festival, right? Well, why do we call it a harvest festival? Because there's a type of holiday that is celebrated all over the world, where the nations, they collect their harvest, and then they eat the first and best fruits of their harvest in a big festival where they celebrate the abundance of life. And every culture has one. In America, we call it Thanksgiving, right? And in Israel, they call it Sukkot.
Yeah.
Well, why? So God obviously didn't see it to be problematic that the pagans have harvest festivals, right? He didn't care.
Yeah, I guess everybody had a harvest festival.
Say again?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just agreeing with you. Everybody does have a harvest festival, no matter what they believed in back in those days, I guess.
Right, and so you can kind of see, you know, so when it comes to a lot of this stuff, there, you know, I feel people with the commercialization and stuff like that, for certain. But when you actually,
that's horrible.
Say again.
The commercialization of like all our holidays is like, maybe that's where the problem lies, I guess, with the whole.
And that's what I would say personally. I think that I don't think it's that the holidays themselves are bad. I think it's that people have turned them into what are essentially these dead husks. You know what I mean? Where all the life of the holiday is gone, so to speak. I mean, for the longest time, I didn't even know why people celebrated Halloween. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, it's the 31st of October, so we're celebrating something. I don't know what thing, but something. You know what I mean? Because it's just a husk. It's not like, it's not anything at all compared to what it once was. But then when you start to look at like the history of why do we celebrate this day? What's up with all that? You know what I mean? And then you do the same with Christmas and Easter and that kind of stuff. And you discover, I think, that these are, there are reasons that people celebrated these holidays, and they're really cool reasons. They're good reasons. So like, we shouldn't let people's misuse of them sort of win the day, I guess. You know what I mean? I do see, actually, really quick, because this will be a good thing to mention here. Andrew asks about Jeremiah 10.
Yeah, go ahead over the chat, I guess, before we take off.
Yeah, and I will probably hop off after this, but Jeremiah 10, a lot of people say that's like similar to a Christmas tree. If you actually look at what's being communicated in Jeremiah 10, it's not the decoration of a tree that Jeremiah is talking about. It's actually the decoration of an altar. And the point that Jeremiah is trying to make is the pagan goes up to the tree and he cuts it down, and he makes half of the tree into, some sort of a tool or utensil or something like that. And he takes another part of the tree and he puts it in the fire to keep himself warm and cook food and all that. And then with this other part of the tree, he makes himself an idol, and then he bows to it, not recognizing the incredible irony that he's praying to this thing that he just threw into a fire and discarded as if it was pure waste. And then he'll decorate it with fancy jewels and with all the other different stuff that he'll decorate it with. And the irony is just lost on the pagan, right? That he is clearly, and I've often made the comment before when talking about like Egyptian paganism, like how incredible is it to think that people worshipped cats? Not incredible in a good way, but incredible in like how do you worship a thing that you're so clearly superior to? It doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? But people did. And Jeremiah's point in Jeremiah 10 is to say, you foolish pagans, basically, do you not see that you are worshiping a tree that you yourselves cut down and then turned into an idol, right? So he's not saying anything about a Christmas tree. He's talking about idols in particular and their futility. Now, if you know people who are doing any sort of a religious ritual with their Christmas tree, then yeah, that's probably a problem. But people aren't, right? They're just they keep them up in their house, and they put some decorations on them and some presents underneath and stuff like that. And I guess your cats pee on them. But other than that, for the most part, it's like there's no like festival or ritual, which would be worse, associated with them, right? They're just kind of decorative. So yeah, Jeremiah 10 is specifically talking about idols, and not just idols, but the futility of making idols out of the same stuff that you fashion and clearly have dominance over.
My whole thing, I guess, would be the whole trying to celebrate some holidays that the Vatican came up with versus taking us away from the biblical holiday. I don't even know myself, so and it's because I grew up brainwashed most of my life, and I haven't had time to. I'm making excuses for myself. I had time to learn them, I just haven't yet. So, but I've been brainwashed to celebrate the holidays that the government has provided for me. So that's my whole thing against it, I guess. It's like a distraction or whatnot. I don't know.
Yeah, and I just tend to have the view, and I don't think the Vatican did mandate them, but my view, just even besides that, is just that I kind of I look at the celebration of both, really. You know what I mean? Because I think it's cool. Like the dedication of the temple is cool, so celebrating Hanukkah is a cool thing, but also
What
the
day is
birth of Jesus
Hanukkah,
is
bro?
cool. So celebrating Christmas is a cool thing, you know. And
When they made the second temple, it's like around the same time as Christmas, no?
yeah, actually, my personal theory, I think Jesus was born on the first day of Hanukkah, which, if I'm right, his birth date would be December 25th, 5 BC. And I think there's pretty good evidence to suggest that, actually.
You got any cool videos you can link in the chat for? Because I got the whole Jesus was born September 11th, 3 BC. You could put that on your search engine. There's like a lot of stuff pops up about it. And people have been saying that for a long time, that he was born the fall, Feast of Trumpets. But then I found the whole, that you can line up the stars, and it was like some big event or whatever that was happening at the time. But I don't know. I never seen any proof that Jesus was born on December 25th. That's what I'm saying. If you could link it in the chat, I'll give it a watch after the stream.
Yeah, so videos probably not at the moment. So, well, I guess there is, if you can ignore the fact that he's a traditionalist Catholic and just listen to the evidence he's presenting. Taylor Marshall has some videos on it, but there's a lot of information in sources outside of YouTube, and I'm going to make a video on it here soon, actually, because History with Hilbert did a video talking about the pagan origins of Christmas, and I'm going to do like a response video talking about how I don't think that's true. And in that video, I'm going to also lay out, the evidence that Jesus is actually born on December 25th. Because, like I said, I think it's pretty convincing, actually. But yeah, stay tuned for that. But with that, I do have to definitely hop off.
All right, me too, bro. But last thing I want to say is when I heard that, bro, because I only heard about that maybe like 3 years ago, the whole Jesus was born September 11th. Like it just rang a bell in my head because, these people in power, they're all Satanists, paganists, high-level devil worshippers or whatever. And it would make sense that they want to demonize a date, like September 11th. That way we all feel sorrow and whatnot, as opposed to what we should be feeling, which would be, if it is Jesus' birthday, is joy, So that's all I had to say. But yeah, with that, we can hop off, bro. If you wanna, you wanna go first, or I'll say goodbye first.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and hop off, and I'll just say to everybody, thanks for listening to my little rants here today. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you guys here soon. Shalom.
Yeah, make sure to subscribe to CJ. I got a channel too. And yeah, God bless y'all. Jesus loves you. Have a good night. Peace.